The Battle of Grim Batol, 10 years after the Dark Portal. During the Second War, the Red Dragon Coriolstras was deeply concerned when Alexstrasza disappeared. He was the Dragon Aspect's consort and closest confidant, and he vowed to do whatever he could to find her. When he finally discovered that she was being held captive by the Dragon Maw, he found that he was utterly helpless. The Dragon Maw had enslaved Alexstrasza with a demon soul, an artifact that could destroy any dragon. Coriolstras could not free her. He pleaded for help from the Dragon Aspects Ysera, Nosdormu, and Malygos, but they were wary of intervening. Like Coriolstras, they feared that the orcs would use the demon soul to destroy them, or even Alexstrasza. Soon it became clear that Deathwing planned to steal some of the Red Dragonflight's unhatched eggs for himself, and Coriolstras nearly fell to despair. After Ronan stumbled upon the Dragon Maw, the Red Dragon found hope once again. Taking on the form of a powerful high elf mage named Crassus, the dragon promised the human all the aid he could muster to free the Red Dragonflight. Ronan had been stunned to find that an orc clan still had this much power after the Second War, and he was determined to break its strength. He rallied a small group of friends, including the high elf ranger Berisa Windrunner and the dwarf griffin rider Falstad Wildhammer, and rushed to Grim Batol to free the Red Dragons. When they arrived, the battle was already underway. The moment the Dragon Maw had left Grim Batol and set out for Dun Algaz, Deathwing attacked and slaughtered countless orcs. He had no desire to keep them or the adult dragons alive. Only the Red Dragonflight's eggs were of use to him. Unfortunately for Deathwing, his brazen assault had unintended consequences. As the battle unfolded, Alexstrasza broke free from her chains. Before Necros could kill her with the demon soul, she devoured him whole, taking vengeance for the horrors inflicted upon her. Then she turned her wrath upon Deathwing. And she was not alone. Ysera, Nosdormu, and Malygos soon joined her in the fight against Deathwing. Though they had rebuffed Coriolstras's calls to help Alexstrasza, the Dragon Aspects had not ignored him. They had decided to keep a close watch on Grim Batol in case an opening presented itself. Deathwing's attack against the orcs gave them one. As the 5 Dragon Aspects grappled in the sky, Ronan and his mortal allies focused their attention on the orcs and the demon soul. Ronan found a flaw in the ancient artifact and destroyed it. In that moment, the power trapped within the relic escaped, returning to the Dragon Aspects. Deathwing could not stand against the newly empowered dragons. He suffered terrible wounds and was forced to flee. He would not be seen again for many years to come. The Red Dragonflight was free again. Many of the Dragon Maw orcs had died in the battle, and the terrified survivors had scattered into the wilds. They would remain a threat on Azeroth, but they would never truly regain their former power. When Deathwing retreated, Lord Daval Prester suddenly vanished from Lordaeron's royal court. His daughter, Onyxia, was left behind to carry on his work, and she relished it. The relationships between Lordaeron and the other Alliance nations were continuing to deteriorate. Onyxia decided to spread her influence to the southern kingdom of Stormwind. She took on the guise of a noblewoman named Katrana Prester and infiltrated Stormwind's royal court. Lady Prester worked to tangle up the city's rebuilding efforts, and she meddled in local politics to keep the kingdom isolated from Lordaeron and the Northlands. Deathwing's son, Nefarian, chose to work from the shadows. He contacted the so-called True Horde in the Blackrock Mountains, manipulating the orcs into allowing the Black Dragonflight to use the location as their new base. Nefarian established a hidden laboratory there, hoping to achieve his father's dream of rebuilding the Black Dragonflight. To that end, he conducted grotesque experiments with the blood of different dragonflights, much of which he harvested from living dragons. Forgotten Oaths. For 10,000 years, Deathwing's fellow dragon aspect had lived without the full measure of their power, and the sudden return of their strength was physically and mentally exhausting. As they acclimated to this change, they came to a troubling conclusion. For too long, the aspects had withdrawn from the world. They could not afford to do so anymore. It was time to take up the charges that the Titans had bestowed upon them once again. Nosdormu, the aspect of time, returned to safeguarding the sanctity of the timeways. He was soon horrified to learn that a mysterious force was trying to change momentous events in history. The ripple effects of this could lead to the destruction of reality itself. Ysera, the aspect of dreams, spent more time in the Emerald Dream, the mystical vision of an untouched, wild Azeroth that helped guide nature in the physical world. But with her returned powers and senses, she noticed that darkness and despair were creeping into the hidden parts of the dream in the form of corruption called the Emerald Nightmare. Neither of them knew it, but both threats were sparked by the old gods. The touch of Jug-Zaron and later N'Zoth was gradually corrupting the Emerald Dream, and the timeways were under assault by the infinite dragonflight. These shadowy creatures came from one of Azeroth's potential futures, though their identity remained a mystery to Nosdormu. Malygos, the aspect of magic, was the least affected by the return of his power. During the War of the Ancients, Deathwing had slain most of his followers and driven the Blue Dragon aspect to the brink of madness. Malygos had hidden himself away in his lair, the Nexus, engulfed by grief and pain. With the return of his strength, his addled mind regained a sliver of clarity. It was not enough to completely break him out of his lethargy, but it did change him. For the first time in ages, Malygos began roaming the Nexus, serving the state of his lair and his followers. Alexstrasza, the aspect of life, needed time to recover after a traumatic ordeal. She and her flight sequestered themselves away to heal, both physically and emotionally. Though most of the dragon aspects were eager to put the past behind them, it would be many years before they fully recovered. The forces of evil would not wait for them to be ready. Call of the Old Gods. During the Second War, betrayal had split the Horde in two. The Orc warlock Gul'dan had broken away from the faction and sought out forbidden power in a place called the Tomb of Sargeras. He had taken two clans with him, the Stormreavers and the Twilight's Hammer, the latter led by the two-headed ogre mage Sho'gul. Gul'dan's treachery severely weakened the Horde, leading to its eventual defeat. In the end, the Legion would punish him for his greed. When Gul'dan ventured into the Tomb of Sargeras, demons were waiting. They ripped apart the warlock and many of his followers and left their bones to rot in the massive tower. Sho'gul and some of the Twilight's Hammer clan narrowly survived and fled from the tomb. They had no reason to continue their allegiance to the Horde or the Legion. In truth, they answered to different masters. They answered to the old gods. The Twilight's Hammer were unlike the Horde's other clans. They wielded shadow magic rather than fell, and they worshipped the powers of the void. The Twilight's Hammer were fanatics who believed in the Hour of Twilight, a dark prophecy that foretold the end of all things. Sho'gul and his followers saw themselves as the agents of this apocalypse. The only question were where and how it would happen. On Azeroth, they found answers. Sho'gul and his followers heard the whispers of the old gods. These entities shared visions of the past with the Twilight's Hammer. They revealed how the world had once been. They revealed the Black Empire and its terrible glory. Sho'gul and the Twilight's Hammer could help restore the old gods. They could break their shackles and build the Black Empire again. Its rise would herald the Hour of Twilight. Sho'gul had once believed that the Horde was the key to bringing about the apocalypse. After Gul'dan's death in the Tomb of Sargeras, he realized that was not the case. The two-headed ogre abandoned the Horde and led his followers on a pilgrimage to Kalimdor. he sensed the presence of an old god somewhere on the distant continent, and he was eager to meet the entity and bask in its terrible power. It was a slow, dangerous journey from the tomb of Sargeras to Kalimdor. The Twilight's Hammer gradually worked their way toward the southern edge of the continent, where dark whispers emanated from beneath the surface. Shogal did not know the land, and many threats lurked in Kalimdor. He meditated for months, submerging both of its minds in the chaotic will of the old gods. Though they were locked in enchanted prisons, millennia of inattention had allowed them to extend their influence across the world in small ways. The old gods urged Shogal onward, guiding him through the strange land and helping him avoid its dangers. Shogal and his servants established a base in a cave system beneath the desert of Tanaris. To the east lay Ankirash, the prison that housed the old god Cthulhu. Shogal sensed he was close to his master. Unfortunately for Shogal, he would not reach the entity anytime soon. Before long, important members of the Twilight's Hammer began to disappear. The others were found dead. At first, Shogal had suspected treason from within, and then he finally discovered the truth. He caught a glimpse of someone cutting the throat on one of his most trusted lieutenants. It was the half-orc assassin named Garona. Long ago, Gul'dan, Shogal, and their closest followers had unscrolled Garona and used her as their personal weapon. During the Second War, she had escaped and broken free from their control. Garona harbored unending hatred for her former masters, and she had tracked Shogal across an ocean to seek her vengeance. The Twilight's Hammer bolstered their defenses and laid traps, but Garona had been studying the region for months. The cave complex was not their home. It was her hunting ground. Night after night, new victims were found. Shogal was furious, but he had no choice. His clan fled the area and searched for a new place to continue their dark work. New legacies. Despite the machinations of the Black Dragonflight, the human kingdom slowly returned to their old prosperity, even if their relationships with one another were not as strong as they had once been. Varian Wrynn, the young prince who had escaped the Horde's destruction of Stormwind City in the First War, was now king, and he was widely considered to be a strong, fair, and visionary leader. He oversaw the rebuilding of Stormwind and married a noblewoman, Tiffin Ilarion. They had a son, and they named him Anduin in the memory of the hero Anduin Lothar, the venerated commander who had perished in the Second War. Grand Admiral Jaina Proudmoore, one of the commanders who had defeated the Horde at sea, still felt grief for the losses he had suffered in the Second War. He maintained order on the high seas with an iron fist, and hunted down pirates and brigands who dared to prey on his territory. His young daughter, Jaina Proudmoore, grew wary of his darkened disposition and opted to receive her schooling in Dalaran. After several years, she began to study arcane magic with the Kirin Tor, and she eventually became an apprentice of the legendary Archmage Antonidas. King Arthas Menethil II of Lordaeron had a son named Arthas, and he saw that he was trained in the ways of warfare and righteousness. Arthas Menethil became a master swordsman under the tutelage of the dwarf Muradin Bronzebeard, Ironforge's ambassador to Lordaeron. The young man was also tutored in the ways of the Holy Light by the revered paladin Uther the Lightbringer. When the prince turned 19, he was inducted into the Order of the Silver Hand to become a paladin himself. Though he was headstrong and stubborn, he distinguished himself as a brave hero and never shirked even the most dangerous of tasks. When Amani trolls sent war bands to raid the borders of Quel'Thalas, an allied nation, Arthas was there to hunt them down and bring them to justice. Arthas was often a center of attention among Lordaeron's nobility, especially when he courted Jaina Proudmoore. The romance created rumors and gossip, but in the end, Jaina was committed to her arcane studies, and Arthas was focused on his future as king. They parted ways to pursue their individual ambitions, but they never let go of their feelings for each other. The War of the Spider. Far from the human nations, the Lich King was rapidly growing his power and building a truly terrifying army. Most of Northrend's inhabitants were easily corrupted by the plague of undeath, and his forces swelled in number. But it wasn't long before the Lich King faced his first real test. An ancient race of insectoids called Nerubians lived in Northrend, and they were monstrously fierce in battle. Their grand kingdom, Azjol Nerub, stretched far beneath the frozen tundra. The Nerubians were aware of the Lich King's presence, and they had no intention of allowing him to conquer them. Any attempts to spread the plague of undeath in their home were ruthlessly snuffed out by the Nerubians' leader, a powerful warlord named Anu-Barak. The Lich King saw no way to subvert their defenses, so he settled on smashing the Nerubians into rubble instead. For years, the Lich King's undead army fought a war of attrition against the insectoids. Each one who fell was added to the Lich King's ranks, and when the endgame came, he was delighted to raise Anu-Barak himself as a powerful undead minion. The former ruler was now a slave, and though he chafed at his leash, he could not free himself from it. The Lich King was so impressed by the Nerubians' resistance that he adopted their architectural style as his own. He infused their jagged ziggurats with magic, causing them to soar in the skies over Northrend. In time, these necropoli would become feared sights across Azeroth. Now, the Lich King was unopposed in Northrend, and yet it was still not time to unleash the plague of undeath on the Eastern Kingdoms. Adding creatures like Anu-Barak to his ranks had taught him the value of corrupting powerful minds. He would need such allies to complete the work ahead. Moreover, the Lich King secretly hoped that he could win these servants to his side and use them to break free from the Legion. The Lich King spread his consciousness across the world, seeking individuals who would be tempted by the power he could offer. Several answered his call.